This episode is brought to you by Marvel Studios Echo. All episodes streaming January 9th, only on Hulu and Disney+. Rated TV MALV. Viewer discretion advised. Maya Lopez has betrayed her mentor, the notorious Kingpin. Now on the run, she returns to her hometown to prepare for the biggest fight of her life. Don't miss Marvel Studios' hardest-hitting series yet. An epic 5-episode event. Marvel Studios Echo. All episodes streaming January 9th, only on Hulu and Disney+.
Hello, and welcome to Scare You to Sleep. I'm your host, Shelby Scott. We made it past June, you guys. Man, that was a crazy month. Thank you for sticking with me through a month of experimental episodes and scheduled episodes and me just being out of town in general and taking forever to answer your emails. I still have so much to catch up on. I am finally getting a chance to sit and start back with scary sounds and horrifying stories from new authors and some from authors who you're already familiar with and have grown to love. I have some small news. There is a new guided nightmare available on Patreon. Also, the show has a subreddit. Yay! So if you ever wanted to participate in discussions but didn't feel comfortable using your personal Facebook page or even just wanted to remain anonymous, which is fine, then Reddit is a great place for you to do that. The subreddit is simply called Scare You to Sleep with no spaces in between when you type it. Also, this is an ad-free episode, but there is a podcast I have been dying to tell you guys about. This isn't sponsored. I actually contacted them maybe like a month ago asking if I could play the trailer for you guys, and I finally got it. So here you go. Enjoy.
Hey everyone, this is Story.
And I'm Mars.
And you're watching Disney Channel. Just kidding.
Don't sue us, please.
We're two best friends who love horror movies, and we're here to talk about Gore Friends, our podcast where we take deep dives into horror films.
From the folklore to the gore, we talk about cinematography, themes, and the stuff that terrified us, all with laughs along the way.
So if you love horror movies, or even if you don't, we have fun discussions, pop quizzes, and horror-themed Would You Rathers on our social media at Gore Friends.
Join our Gore Gang by finding us wherever you listen to your podcast and on Periscope.
Later, Gore Friends!
I also wanted to say thank you to those of you who actually went and rated and reviewed the show on Apple Podcasts. I asked and you guys answered so lovingly and left so many great reviews. Thank you so much. I've already seen a difference in my spot on the charts. Your love and support truly shows. And before we begin, I wanted to give a quick shout out to all my listeners in Romania and Lebanon. I got an email and this show has skyrocketed on Apple Podcast lists for both those countries for some reason, and I'm super stoked about it. Thank you all, and hello and welcome. All right, you guys, this is seriously my favorite Brevity episode so far, if not one of my favorite episodes, period, honestly. There is so much variety packed into this week. I cannot wait to hear what you think. So grab your favorite beverage and settle in. Here we go. Our first story of the night is by Colin Kraft, and it's called 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. OCD is a monster that cuts away at you slowly, day by day. It makes sufferers do things that are strange, irrational, even paradoxical to those who have never experienced it. Magical thinking is what they call it. We do things a specific way or a specific number of times to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe. A mother may buckle her child into his car seat 3 times, fearing that if she doesn't, he'll be killed in a car wreck. A priest crosses himself 20 times every time he has a sinful thought, knowing in his heart that he will be doomed to hell if not. 10 is my magic number. When I was a kid, I used to count my steps on my fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Stop. Start back at 1, 2, 3, I knew something bad would happen to me if I lost count even once. Everything I do in tens. 10 chews before I swallow my food. If something catches my eye, I make sure to look at it for 10 seconds. Before entering a room, I turn the doorknob 10 times. You get the drill. I don't count on my fingers anymore since I've gotten older, but the counting in my head never stops. Cooking has always been an escape for me. Everything is so rhythmic and precise. No one notices when I stir my sauces exactly 10 times. No one counts when my salads have exactly 10 slices of tomato, cucumber, and boiled egg. It doesn't bother anyone when my pies and cakes are cut into exactly 10 equal slices. Recently, I've been experimenting with cold-cut sandwiches. I've always loved the way meat and cheese fresh from the deli tastes. The sharp spice of mustard with the creaminess of provolone makes my mouth water. I splurged and bought myself a deli slicer. The kitchen is the only place I ever really treat myself, so I thought, why not? Now, I'm standing at my counter, counting my fingers again, just like when I was a kid. See, when the first one got caught in the slicer, I really had no choice. Everything in tens. Really, I am so relieved I have exactly 10 fingers. If I hadn't cut them all off, something really bad might have happened. The Year Nobody on Earth Died by user More Mustache. This water tastes funny. I shouldn't complain. It's a miracle the water had been turned back on, and that we still have electricity, for that matter. It's been just over 12 months since the governments of the world began to notice that death rates had started to plummet. Another month after that was when they realized death rates worldwide had flatlined altogether. So far, nobody can figure out how it happened, whether through some mystic intervention or a sinister freak of nature. Either way, it's the disaster no one expected. Of course, sickness still occurred over the last year. Accidents still took place and people were still attacked. It's just that none of them happened to die. But birth rates continued, strong as ever. Soon hospitals overfilled. Homelessness shot through the roof. Overpopulation overtook the planet. Food, water, electricity, basic supplies all started to dwindle in the shadow of the ever-increasing populace. Suddenly, the TV in the living room crackles to life of its own accord. I walk in and look. An emergency broadcast. Something must be happening. It's a live feed from the Oval Office. The president sits at her desk. She shuffles papers on the table nervously. Today is a hard day, she croaks. Tears well up in her eyes. It is a sad day for our great country. Usually I can come out and address you all in a collected, presidential manner. But today, I cannot. Today, I need to speak to my fellow Americans. Not as president, but as a person. The past year has been one of the hardest the world has ever had to face. And this international crisis has caused unprecedented turmoil throughout our country and the world. There are no signs of this catastrophe course correcting itself in the near future. And we are running out of options. We need to deal with this situation ourselves. We've been scouring through our options, and yet Only one possible solution has presented itself. The president allows herself one short sob as fresh tears roll down her cheeks. And I make this decision with the heaviest of hearts, but I know it is my duty to do what is best and necessary for the country I love. We intend to carry out this solution in the most humane way and fairest possible method. Random selection. God bless you all, and God bless America. With that cryptic addressal, the broadcast cuts to feeds of government trucks parked outside random different residential areas across the country, dispatching what looks to be various corpses in the backs of the trucks. I walk over to the window and notice a truck pulling up outside our block. Funny, it looks just like the government ones on TV. Suddenly, a loud thump comes from the kitchen. I rush in and see my roommate lying face down on the kitchen floor. Before I have time to react, my vision goes blurry and my head spins. I look down at the glass in my fist. This water tastes funny. These next 3 stories are by Reddit user CUKatie2983. This one is called Pills. Jane arranged the myriad of pills on her kitchen table, forming a literal rainbow of drugs. The blue pill was to help with the insomnia. The little round pink pill took away the haziness of the blue pill. The diamond-shaped pill helped with the incontinence the little round pink pill brought. The long orange pill got rid of the dry eyes and the cotton mouth from the diamond-shaped pill. The normal-looking white pill was purely for the sake of her liver. She couldn't even remember what the purple striped pill did anymore. The long yellow and red pill helped with the migraines the purple striped pill gave her, and that brought her full circle to the blue pill. You know what? Jane pushed back from her kitchen table and stood up. It's too much. All of this modern medicine just makes everything worse. Not anymore. And with that, she brushed her teeth and laid down in bed, happy for a night without a belly full of pills. She woke up to chirping birds and sunbeams streaming through her window. She blinked in the morning light and stretched. She felt so refreshed for a change.
Well, that's better now, isn't it?
Jane turned and looked at the creature sitting on her nightstand. It had a man's body, dressed in a very dapper suit, with a furry pink bunny's head sitting on its shoulders. His cute little nose sniffed the air while his fingers fanned theatrically over his silver knotted tie. Jane noted that when he smiled, his lips stretched jaggedly back to his ears, and his teeth somehow appeared rotten and razor sharp at the same time. His big bunny head melted off his skull as he spoke, his words slithering out like a dying tape recorder.
I'm so glad we can be friends again, Jane.
I've missed you.
Oh, right, Jane said aloud. That's what the purple pill was for. Not that tacos would have been better. Again by CUKatie2983. Jerry wiped a bead of sweat off his forehead as he ran through the crowd, dodging amusement park goers as he went. In his chest, his heart felt like it was going to beat right through his ribs. He'd been the lead engineer at Wildwood Park for 4 years, and never before had gotten a call like the one 10 minutes ago. The operator of the park's new coaster didn't say much except there'd been an accident and to get over there now. The Ghost Whisperer opened up in the spring, and the park goers ate it up. Even now, in the late summer, the lines stayed long all day, with some riders waiting 2 hours for their turn. The coaster itself boasted 4 different kinds of loops, a 0 to 60 launch, and 2 drops that were angled more than 90 degrees. Clocking in at 2 minutes and 48 seconds, it was definitely worth the wait. He reached the coaster's entrance and rushed to the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. Up on the station's platform, the ride operator, a college kid named Mark, and 2 other engineers were waiting. The platform was deserted of waiting riders, and the official ride closed until further notice signs were already posted. Jerry huffed. "What's going on?" I stopped the coaster at the top of the last hill so we could get everyone else out of here before we brought the train down," Mark started. "I couldn't see much from the camera, but I could tell a steel cable snapped loose as the train was riding towards it." "How do you know it's bad?" Mark stepped aside to show the screen that said camera was showing. It was splattered red. "There's that, and there's..." "What?" Jerry pushed. It's just... I've never heard a train so quiet." Jerry grimaced. "Bring it down." Mark pushed a lever and everyone on the platform waited. The train braked ahead of them and then slowly rolled into the station before stopping. One of the other engineers vomited, and Mark had gone totally white. Even though it was a hot August day, Jerry felt ice pumping through his veins. Outside of the platform, joyful screams were heard along with the thunder of other rides. But on the Ghost Whisperer's platform, in the southeast corner of the park, 16 riders sat, obediently strapped to their seats. The top parts of their skulls all neatly sliced right down to their brains. A tall man's eyeballs dangled freely down his face, while beside him a younger boy's eyes gazed widely into nothing. A once sunny blonde girl was now a sad sunset, and her boyfriend wore half an expression of permanent glee. A little bird landed on one of the passengers' shoulders and started pecking at her exposed sinus cavity. As the world began to swim in front of him, Jerry could only think of how he wished his wife hadn't told him that they were having lasagna for dinner. This is Shut Up Freak by Tammy Shaw. Also, Tammy has a book out on Amazon available. It is called Six Terrifying Horror Stories That Will Keep You Up at Night. I'll leave a link in the show notes. Here we go. The last thing I remember before waking up in the hospital was that I needed money to fix my car. I should have just sold it or scrapped it, really. It was a heap of junk. The hospital room was silent. I slowly pulled out the needle that was sticking out of my right arm. Hello? Hello? My voice bounced back at me. No one answered. I peered out the open door into a silent hallway of empty beds and abandoned equipment. Hello? Anyone here? I checked all the exits. All of them were either blocked or locked. Hello? Is anybody here? A loud bang from the window scared the shit out of me. Fuck! Who's there? No answer. I carefully walked towards the window that made the sound, then noticed they were covered from the outside with opaque plastic sheets. I got closer. A large silhouette passed by, scaring the crap out of me once more. Hey! Hey, you! I pounded on the glass with a closed fist, desperate for some sort of communication. Hey! I continued to thump. I'm in here! The silhouette stopped and stood perfectly still, and staring in my direction. Oi! Can't you hear me, motherfucker? I'm in here! Help me! This time I kicked the glass. I was becoming highly agitated and angry. The silhouette backed up and fired off a few rounds straight up in the air. Shut up, freak, the silhouette answered. What? What's going on? Please, just help me. Please tell me what's happening. I could no longer hold back the tears as they freely flowed down my cheeks, dripping from my chin onto the hospital floor. I wiped my cheeks clean, shook off the emotions, and began to pound on the glass again. Hey! Are you good? I stopped myself mid-sentence. There was now fresh blood on the window pane. I glanced at my hand. Layers and layers of dead skin were stuck to me, held together by fresh blood. I lightly touched my cheeks again and easily pulled away the layers. I freaked and fell backwards over a chair, hitting my head pretty hard. Suddenly, I remembered something. I ran back to the room I started in, rapidly searching for any paperwork that had been left behind. Under the bed, I found a folder, closed and also covered in blood. I reached under and pulled it out, catching my arm on the underside of the metal frame, which instantly tore my skin away and showed off my muscles and tendons. Bitch! It was strange. I felt no pain, just rage. I stood up and caught a glimpse of myself in the small and dirty mirror. I grimaced at the unfamiliar sight and punched the reflection, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. Again, it didn't hurt. As I stared down at the first page, my anger began to build more and more. 4 simple words explained everything. Clinical trials. Patient 0. I should have just sold that heap of junk. This next story is by Reddit user Punchmeat. If you'd like more of their stories, and particularly in the sci-fi genre, you can visit medium.com/@viewfrommars, and I'll leave a link to that in the show notes. This one is called It's Crazy That We Just Throw Dead People Away. It truly boggles my mind. I mean, everyone agrees about harvesting bodies for organ donation or scientific study, but honestly, are those the only uses that are acceptable? Not everyone is a scientist. Our bodies are good for so much more. First of all, the meat. Look, I'm not talking Wagyu, but it's 100% viable, and in the hands of a half-decent chef, it can be quite tasty. Like pork, almost. It's a lean meat, depending on the person, and there's lots of protein for nutrition. Even older meat, though a bit stringier, is still fine to eat, and if it's not your thing, you can use it as bait for hunting. Developing countries would especially benefit from utilizing it, even just as feed for their livestock. Then there's skin, which has many, many practical uses when tanned. Book covers, leather jackets, lampshades, hats, you name it. It's very pliable and easy to work with, not thick and unwieldy like what you get from other animals. And trust me, only an expert can tell the difference between a belt made from cow leather and one made from human leather. You could be wearing one and not even know it. Hell, you'd be bragging about it. It's exotic. Bones, though. Those are the big one for me. Flesh can rot and become useless or, even worse, dangerous to consume. So we'd need lots of regulations and whatnot, I'll grant you that. But bones stay viable for hundreds of years. And they're everywhere. You can make all sorts of tools from them, from knives to arrow tips to eating utensils. And the bones of our toes and fingers are the perfect size for jewelry and trinkets. They carve almost as beautifully as ivory. It's ridiculous. We could be putting a dent in the ivory trade, people, just by making bonework more socially acceptable. But no. We're too scared to re-examine social norms that some illiterate goat herders decided on 1,000 years ago. The fact that people bury perfectly good bodies, or even worse, burn them down to ashes, is so wasteful in an increasingly conservation-minded society. We recycle everything else, don't we? If you ask me, that's insanity, really, that we just throw it all away. Whereas actually using dead bodies is a completely sane thing to do. You'd think that this would be clear to anyone with a rational mind, or at least one or two in any random group of 12. But unfortunately, the jury did not agree. This next story is by Reddit user Minister of Owls, and it is called "My Neighbor Has Been Standing on His Front Lawn for Hours." My neighbor has been standing on his front lawn for hours. He's still there, staring at my bedroom window. I don't understand what he's doing. His name is Thomas. Thomas is not a nice man. He's a bastard who should have died years ago, but he's never acted like this before. God, what's he doing? Just staring. Dead silent. His wife, where the fuck is she? Hold on, I see her. She's coming down with that cane. Going to give him a smack, I hope. She didn't. She's on my lawn now. Staring at my house. They're not talking. They don't look angry. I don't think they even noticed each other. A few minutes later, their daughter Anna came down to stare. Anna is blind. I'm watching the whole family from my living room window. Little Tommy, the evening newspaper kid, was cycling down the street. Now he took one look at my house and stopped. He's standing on the street right now. All my neighbors are slowly getting out of their houses. Little children, old men, cars are stopping in the middle of the road so their occupants can press their face against the glass and gawk at my house. Old Miss Agee, who can't walk, opened her bedroom window, and I can see her silhouette looming there, hands on the glass. It's getting dark now. They're still standing there. So silent, like they're dead or something. So many people now, on their front lawns and the streets, just staring at my house, at my bedroom window. I hear things coming from upstairs. Something moving, someone talking, breathing. Hundreds of people breathing. My eyes have been stuck looking at the ceiling for so long. It took hours to write, because I can't look away from the ceiling. Only seconds. Just now, everyone started moving. They started walking to my house. I'm going upstairs now. I need to see what's up there. As many Scary to Sleep fans know, I've been going through a lot of changes in my life, and one thing I've been doing is getting my finances much more organized, and that includes paring down some of the subscriptions I pay for. It feels like everything is a subscription these days, be it for the gym or streaming services or music, the list goes on, and something that has helped me tremendously is Rocket Money. They not only helped me cancel subscriptions that were a pain to try to do myself. Have you ever tried to deal with some of these companies directly? It's just a headache. Rocket Money also alerts me when the subscriptions I did keep go up in price, giving me the ability to weigh my options and keep those little extras that add up oh so quickly in check. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills. I can see all of my subscriptions in one place, and if I see something I don't want, I can cancel it with a tap. I never have to get on the phone with customer service. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has helped save its members an average of $720 a year with over 500 million in canceled subscriptions. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/scareyoutosleep. That's rocketmoney.com/scareyoutosleep. rocketmoney.com/scareyoutosleep. These next few stories are by author Kitty Fields, and this one is called The Closest Thing We Have to Mermaids. It was mid-August when the night janitor first noticed what he would later describe as growths in the mouths of the tropical fish. They hadn't seemed important enough to warrant a report, so by the time everyone else noticed that something was growing inside the fish, whatever it was had already begun to climb out. Though the little parasites that the fish were regurgitating bore little to no resemblance to the traditional mermaid, the excitement of seeing a live fish's mouth suctioned around the waist of an emaciated pixie overrode any assumptions that these new attractions were fake. Newport Aquarium soon had the mermaid exhibit up and running, and it quickly became their most popular attraction. What was once the moderately popular tropical fish exhibit was now filled to the brim with legions of families who were all too eager to tap on the glass of a real, live mermaid tank. And then, presumably by way of a clumsy feeder or a mix-up with the water supply, the disease spread to other tanks. The creatures that clawed their way out of the sturgeon were far less endearing than their tropical counterparts, while the fish themselves were applauded for their prehistoric appearance. The dead-eyed mermaids they produced gave everyone who worked at the aquarium a sense of unease. The shark's parasites were mostly unsuccessful, but no less enthusiastic in their attempts at exiting through their host's teeth, and the ones that survived were hardly in any condition to greet anyone. The deep-sea exhibit was shut down at the first sign of something trying to pry open the mouth of an anglerfish. None of these new developments seemed to deter the guests, though. In fact, it brought in hundreds of new tourists in search of what they perceived to be the summer equivalent of a haunted house. They bypassed the seemingly gentle tropical fish for the increasingly violent sharks and sturgeon. They ignored the keeper's warnings to stay back when the mangled shark mermaids dug their nails into the glass. They gathered around the tanks at feeding time to watch the sturgeon maids fight each other for the biggest scraps of meat. Most of them believed that the whole thing was fake. And then one day, on the morning of September 1st, Newport Aquarium's resident tour guide led his first group of the day to the far end of the building, only to find every single sturgeon in the tank floating dead and mermaid-free. The guide's attempt at quelling the group's outcries of frustration and disappointment were drowned out quite suddenly by the screams from the aquarium's entrance, followed by the distinct sound of claws clicking on the concrete floor. Mermaids, as it turned out, were only stage 1 in the parasite's development. This next one is also by Kitty Fields, and it is called The Sense of Summer. The carnival looms off in the distance, past the sea of cars that seem to occupy every inch of the field surrounding the venue. A Ferris wheel towers over the other attractions, shimmering under the waves of heat rising up from the grass. He's never been on the Ferris wheel before, and, truth be told, he'd much rather be looking at animals in the petting zoo right now. Or riding on the tiger train. Last year he'd been an inch too short, and so he sat on the side and watched Dad and Allie go around and round in the metallic tiger-shaped cars. This year, though, he was tall enough, and as soon as Mom and Dad came back to the car to get him, he'd be headed straight for the tiger train. The heat is unwavering. His hair, soft and blonde and freshly cut, is plastered against his forehead. He reaches a hand forward, searching for his green plastic bottle that's fallen from its place in its cup holder, but the car seat objects and locks its restraints firmly in place. It doesn't matter. He knows that Mom and Dad and Allie and Eric and their various assortment of friends will be back any time now. More and more cars begin to fill up the empty spaces beside him, further obscuring the view of the carnival. He worries that he won't be able to see them when they come. The air is stagnant now. He breathes through his mouth in an effort to draw more in, but he only succeeds in sending himself into a fit of coughing. He wishes the window was open, just a little bit. Outside the car, a woman in a truck steps out of its passenger side, and he reaches a tiny hand towards the tinted window in an attempt to alert her. His hand doesn't quite reach the pane. Tears of frustration well in his eyes as the woman turns away and heads towards the fair. And at the other end of the carnival, an exhausted mother trails behind her daughter and a group of friends whose names she's already forgotten as they rush toward the food carts. Her husband waits for her there, with her son and his posse of significantly less rowdy friends. Any sense of relief she might feel at the prospect of resting is suddenly overshadowed by the horrifying realization that her husband isn't pushing the stroller that should be holding her youngest son. The trip back to the car is just as long as before, but neither parent feels the stifling heat or hears the complaints of their hungry children. They race through the hordes of people, pushing aside anyone who stands in their way and ignoring the inevitable fact that it's been almost 3 hours since they left. As they jerk open the car door, the smells of the carnival dissipate, immediately replaced by something else considerably less delightful to the senses. The Goat Woman's Daughter. Her name was Anne, and she was a goat farmer. And apart from these two very concrete facts, nobody seemed to know anything about the woman who lived in the hills above their village. Rumors of witchcraft arose every so often, as they tend to do in situations like these, but despite passers-by assertions that they'd seen her wandering naked through the fields beneath the full moon or caught a glimpse of a pile of suspiciously satanic-looking books through her window, these claims often went unverified and soon became old news. Besides, they had no reason to villainize her. She sold the best milk in town and offered them concoctions from her garden that cured most illnesses within hours. And she welcomed the village's children when they timidly approached her farm with flowers to feed the goats. When the annual fair rolled around, she'd be down on Main Street with the rest of them, parading her best billy goat in hope for a blue ribbon and graciously accepting the compliments on his angular horns and lustrous coat. And then, in the middle of winter, and on a particularly cold night, she summoned a midwife and gave birth to a baby girl. The farm's new addition turned more heads than any other Whisperers had in the past, as the general consensus surrounding Anne was that she'd been far too busy tending to her goats to have time for a husband. Indeed, the only man anyone had ever seen go near her house was a farmhand, a quiet young man whose wild hair and green eyes were rumored to match those of the babies. From that point onwards, Anne withdrew herself from the town. She stopped selling milk, stopped coming to the fairs, and posted a "Do Not Feed the Goats" sign outside her pasture. The only indication that she was still around was the occasional cry of a baby drifting down the hillside into town. Inevitably, witchcraft rumors started up again when someone pointed out that Anne was a bit too old to be having children, and the farmhand continued to insist he had not fathered her little girl. One day, Millie Johansson, passing on the road below, decided it was high time someone get a good look at Anne's elusive daughter. She snuck up the hill and put an eye to a crack in the closed window shutters, turned on her heel, and ran back to town, shrieking of devil worship the entire way there. When the group that had gathered on Main Street finally calmed her down, Millie described the little girl's horrific features as best as she could. Her eyes, now more yellow than green, slitted and glassy and far too wide set on her elongated face. Her hands, stubby and fingerless. The angular horns, though, were what really set them into a frenzy. The town had been right, of course, in their allegations of witchcraft. But none of them had even come close to guessing who fathered her child. Donahue's Pies. Charlotte Donahue was magic in the kitchen. Better than either of her parents who ran the bakery. Better even than her grandmother who'd written most of the recipes. Each pie was a masterpiece in itself, laced with intricate floral accents and crisscrosses that raised many an eyebrow when Mrs. Donahue explained that no, it wasn't her who designed this, but her 15-year-old daughter. They went into the oven at alarming rates, one right after the other, and came out a perfect 214 degrees. Nobody quite knew how she did it. That didn't stop them from buying up the store's entire supply most days of the week. He came into the bakery every Saturday afternoon. She first met him in July, at the peak of the heat stroke-inducing weather that their little town never managed to avoid during the summer months. Customers were far and few during that 3-month period, but there he'd been, hovering over the glass case and trailing his eyes across the still steaming pies that Charlotte herself had woken up before dawn to make. He bought a whole gooseberry pie, for his mother, he said, for their 4th of July celebration. His name was Johnny Lancaster, and Charlotte had decided then and there she was going to marry him someday. 6 days later, he brought his fiancée in with him. Her name was Rosalie Martin, blonde, delicate, not a hair out of place. She smiled sweetly at Charlotte before hooking her arm through Johnny's and dragging him over to the pie case to pick out the delicacies for their engagement party. Every word to Charlotte was accompanied by a head tilt and a patronizing smile that seemed to be reserved solely for addressing the child Rosalie undoubtedly thought her to be. She paid for the order, 5 pies filled with various fruit concoctions, and left without another word. 24 hours later, Rosalie Martin was found dead in her home. The local paper headlined the tragedy, but left out the details. Miss Martin had been found by her fiancé. Cause unknown. No mention of how every inch of her skin had been evenly baked, flaking off at the slightest touch like some kind of grotesque pastry, or her blood curdled to the point of resembling a Marionberry filling. Certainly nothing about her body temperature when she'd been found. A precise 214 degrees. And Charlotte, no longer able to mask the false sorrow she'd conveyed when hearing of the news, had slid her grandmother's other recipe book back under the floorboards in her room. She'd already begun to plan the pie she'd bake for the funeral. A Helpful Neighbor by Reddit user RealScience87. I heard a knock and opened the door. There stood Robbie, my neighbor. Not cute, but not ugly, plain-faced Robbie. He often came over to help me with things, fixing a faucet or changing a light fixture. He once helped me remodel my whole bathroom, and after a home invasion, he changed the locks on my doors for me. Sometimes he even mowed my lawn, just to be nice. He seemed like the kind of guy a father would be happy that his single daughter lived next to. He was sweating and smiling at me excitedly. I slammed my closet shut and ran. This next story is by author Jesse Campbell. If you'd like to read more of his work, he has a website called winsomeman.com. I'll leave a link in the show notes. And he also wanted me to mention that it's actually powered by Wix. Remember, wix.com/podcast for 10% off. Anyway, this is an ad-free episode. I'm sorry to sneak that in. This one is really great, and it's called Don't Hug Grandma Too Tight. I know you're excited to see her, dear, but please don't hug your grandmother too tightly. She's very old, you see. Her bones are brittle now, and you don't want to hurt her, do you? And don't say rude things about the smell, okay? When people get old, their bodies change. She may not smell the way she used to, but that's not her fault. It's normal the way the smell fills the house. If you feel a little sick, that's normal too. I know there are a lot of flies, dear, but don't say anything to your grandmother. Just swat them away or ignore them. They can't hurt you. They aren't hurting her. We can't open the blinds. Your grandmother likes it better in the dark. She's a private person. Her business is her own, and we need to respect that. Yes, I know she's very cold. When you get old, sometimes your circulation doesn't work very well. That means your blood doesn't flow like it should. It sounds bad, but it's okay. She's just a little cold. She's used to it by now. No, you shouldn't talk to your grandmother. Her hearing is bad and her throat is very dry. It's hard for her to have a conversation. Just let her know you love her and don't mind if she doesn't say anything back. There is nothing crawling out of Grandma's nose, dear. It's dark in here. You're seeing things. Of course we'll come back and visit again. We love Grandma. We want everyone to know how much we love her and how good it is to see her. You understand? You should tell people that we saw your grandmother and tell them that she's well. She's going to live for years and years and years. Now, be a dear and grab that letter that fell through the mail slot. The one that says Social Security. Grandma wants us to have it. Say goodbye. Say I love you. But don't worry, we'll be back next month. Our last story of the evening is one I've been wanting to do for a little while now. It is by Vanessa Kennedy, who you'll recognize from her ghostly monologue, which I have a couple more of those coming up that she sent me. I'm really excited about. That was one of my favorite episodes to do. Anyway, this one, it was a little too short for a regular episode, but too long for brevity. But you know what? Whatever. So I decided to put it on the end, so that way if you aren't in the mood for something a little bit longer than what you've heard this episode, you can, come back to it later. Anyway, this is Take Me Home by Vanessa Kennedy. I stood under a light, whimpering as I looked at the ancient gates in front of me. The light bulb buzzed as it fought to stay on. An electric shock ran through my veins every time the light dimmed, threatening to go out. This place was terrifying in the daytime, never mind in the dark. In the few moments of darkness, I held my breath and waited for the light to return. The swaying lights were the only areas where I felt safe. I wanted the morning to come quickly. I wanted to go home. The wind blistered my exposed flesh as I shivered and tried to convince myself to do what I needed to do. I pushed on the gate, hoping it was locked, but it creaked open, rolling over the grass. It screamed as the iron hinges pulled the doors aside. I flicked on my torch and ascended in. Branches snapped under my shoe-cladded feet as I counted out my steps. The swampy moss, like grass, squished under my feet, making my sock damp. Erected faces stared at me as they stood forever in prayer. The scattered trees made for creepy company as I progressed. I weaved myself through the many rows of headstones, trying to find the one I was looking for. I could smell the stench of freshly overturned dirt. I jumped as my shovel hit a small stone. The noise pierced the night like a gunshot. I froze as I wanted for the blood to settle in my ears. Then the wind started to howl. Its cacophony echoed off the stones, bringing the cries of the dead. Pain and loneliness baked as anguish and anger boiled from below. As the wind blew, the ground started to shake and quiver. I could hear the earth splitting around me as the bones broke through the surface. Groans of freedom erupted through the wind. I held my breath as I waited to see what was going to happen next. I couldn't see where the noises were coming from, but it sounded like I was surrounded. All I could see was what was visible in the torchlight, but I could sense them getting closer. I turned to look at the gate. The gate was gone. The light was a mere speck in the darkness. I had gone too far. I miscounted. Fear and bile rose in my stomach as I held onto the torch. The ground continued to open as the dead came to life. I felt a hot breath on my shoulder, making my blood go cold. My saliva had retreated from my mouth and out into my pants. I slowly turned to see nothing. I blinked as relief swept over me. Quickly, I threw my light around, making sure that I was the only one there. I had imagined the whole thing. Then there was a small pop as the earth around my feet blew. I felt the discarded earth hit my coat, and then a large, bony, heavy hand gripped my leg. Its fingers were like tentacles wrapping themselves around, squeezing leverage. Spasms started throughout my body as the corpse climbed out of its grave. The earth underneath my feet weakened as the grip on my leg tightened. Decomposing flesh hung off its frame. Pest-infested clothes clung to its bones. The face more resembled Swiss cheese than a human's face. Worms hung loosely out of its nose. My stomach churned as the corpse held out his free hand to grasp my own. Skin dripped off the fingers, revealing a white bone. The skin hung there loosely as the creature shook its hand for help. Pleading grumbles reverberate from its decomposing throat. The ground rumbled and tumbled in on itself as the thing tried to climb. It seemed like the earth was trying to pull him back in, back to where he was supposed to remain. I stood there frozen as the pleading skeleton clawed for assistance. I stared at the black holes that had become his eyes. His jaw slowly opened, and his head rose to look at me to say something. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this week's stories. This week's Patreon shoutouts go out to Kathleen Ennis and Anthony Stavish. Come in and get your giant hug over the airwaves. Thank you for your support, you guys. It means so much and has really created so many positive changes in my life so I can bring you guys more and more content to enjoy. Remember, you can send stories to scarytosleep@gmail.com or through the contact tab on scarytosleep.com. Also, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, there's a new guided nightmare available for Patreon. It's based on my favorite time slip story. I really like this one. I wrote it myself. It's one of my favorites I've done so far, so go enjoy that. For as little as $1 a month, you get access to all the bonus episodes. Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram @ScareYouToSleep. Join the subreddit. I saw someone made the first discussion post, and I would love to see people's ideas and opinions, and a lot of my stories today came from Reddit users, so feel free to tag them and tell them what you thought of their stories. Okay, I think that's all for this week, my beautiful listeners. Now, go get some sleep. Sweet dreams.